Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I hope you're doing remarkably well. Well, we're on part 3 of our story tonight, and it's very, very exciting. And I've got a feeling that Cordelia Fitzwilliam is going to open up a big can of worms. So let's find out what that is. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's continue with part 3 of our story tonight. I'm very glad to say, despite the obvious generation gap between me and Cordelia Fitzwilliam, we became the best of friends, connecting so well on every level. She didn't think any less of me that I didn't come from her side of the track. Indeed, I think she delighted in getting to know someone that was not like any of her self-entitled friends. She described me as being extremely refreshing. We would regularly take our dogs off to the park together every morning. I had taken a rain check from being an occupational therapist for a while, as Titan and I were beginning to try for a baby. But every month when I checked the pregnancy test, it was always negative. I knew for some women it could take a while to fall pregnant, so I refused to become discouraged. I owned a white Maltese poodle called Pixie, while Cordelia's dog was a pug called Lola, and they got on together famously. One day, while we were at the park eating ice creams together on a park bench, while watching our dogs chase each other around the place, Cordelia seemed to be caught up in her own world. "Is everything all right, Cordelia?" I asked her. "It seems as if something is preying on your mind." Cordelia glanced at me. "Is it that obvious?" she asked. "What is it?" I said. "You know you can tell me anything." "Can I really?" she asked. "I certainly would prefer to talk to you about this than anyone else I know. But I certainly do wonder that if I were to speak to you about such things, whether you might consider me a tad foolish, perhaps, or rather eccentric." "Eccentric, most definitely," I grinned. "But foolish, no." I slapped her on the arm teasingly, in a light-hearted gesture. "Don't be ridiculous, Cordelia. You couldn't be foolish even if you tried. That's a word you would employ for me, but not for you. Never for you." It was then Cordelia asked a rather extraordinary question that I never expected to come out of her mouth. "Do you believe in Bigfoot?" she asked me, as we continued to watch our dogs bounding around the park, playing with their other doggy friends. For a moment I thought I'd misheard Cordelia. Or was this some kind of trick question, I pondered. Put it this way, this was not the kind of question I would have expected Cordelia to ask of me. I was certain that the vast majority of New Yorkers living in this part of the pond would never give the cryptid creature a second thought. So to hear Cordelia talking about it so matter-of-factly took me rather aback. "Sorry," I said, looking a little bemused. "What was it you were saying, Cordelia?" I was sure I'd misheard her. "I am wondering, Shelley dear, if you believe that there is such a thing as Bigfoot. Do you think that such a humanoid creature could exist here in North America, Canada possibly, Alaska, maybe even parts of Australia?" "Well," I said, looking a little stumped, "I can't say that I've ever given the matter much thought. Why do you ask?" "It's my younger brother Hugh," said Cordelia. "About a month ago, he was staying at my late husband's cabin in Canada. It's a beautiful place, you know, not too far away from the town of Banff. And when I say beautiful, I under-exaggerate that. We're talking about sparkling turquoise lakes, groves of tall, lofty, majestic trees, skies as blue and as perfect as a cornflower, and undulating mountainous valleys, and meadows where wild flowers grow in heavenly clusters together that would take your breath away quite literally." "You have a cabin near Banff?" I asked wonderously. "That's amazing. You never told me that. You learn something every day." "You've never been to the town of Banff before?" Cordelia asked me. "No, I never have been there, but I've seen pictures of the place, and some of those pictures remind me of the Swiss Alps. It's chocolate box country for sure. Sorry, I'm getting carried away rather romantically. You were talking about your brother Hugh. Go on. Well, Hugh is an outdoor enthusiast. He loves going to stay at my late husband's cabin. He lives in Canada, and occasionally takes a long weekend off to stay at our cabin, with his wife Pearl. I'm so glad he does, so he can keep an eye on the place for me. I don't have the heart to sell the place. The cabin has been in my husband's family tree for generations, and I believe if I sold the place, my late husband would literally turn in his grave, along with his father's father, who'd probably haunt me for the rest of my life, she teased. You're funny, Cordelia, I chuckled. I doubt that would ever happen. How do you look after the place if you go there so irregularly, if you don't mind my asking? Well, I haven't been there for many years, it's true, said Cordelia melancholically. Too many memories of happier times I spent there with my late husband, I suppose. I do get a maintenance man to come to the cabin twice a year, to attend to anything that needs fixing up. I organise for a cleaning team known as the Chalet Maids to pop around once a week, to ensure things don't get too dusty. From what I understand, they do an exemplary job there. Believe me, trouble ensues if you don't keep an eye on things, because the next thing you know, there are mice nesting in your sofa, and dust cementing every available surface, and I can't allow that to happen to the cabin. I agree with you. Maintenance and cleanliness is very important, or everything goes to seed. It certainly does. Anyway, on this trip to the cabin, my brother Hugh and his wife Pearl took their 2 grandchildren with them, as his daughter was going abroad with her husband. So 6-year-old Verity and 8-year-old Maximilian were left in their capable charge. Your brother's grandchildren must have been delighted to go and stay at the cabin with him, I said. Oh, the children love that cabin, Cordelia agreed wholeheartedly. Think about it, Shelley. What child doesn't love exploring the natural world? My brother is crazy about his grandchildren, as is his wife Pearl. He spoils them rotten. But then that's a grandparent's privilege, isn't it? But of course it is, I agreed. But all this that you're talking about, what has it got to do with Bigfoot? I asked, wondering rather if my abrupt remarks seemed almost rude. But Cordelia didn't seem to take offence. Did your brother see the cryptic creature while staying at the cabin? I asked gingerly. Did he tell you he saw a Bigfoot, and you're struggling to believe him? Is that what this is all about? Cordelia raised a hand, as if to stop my wild assumptions from blossoming too fast. I'm not there yet, Shelley. Slow down, for goodness sake. I haven't told you the whole story yet, have I? In fact, I've barely begun. Sorry, I apologised. I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I? Please, go on. Cordelia paused for a brief moment, waved a hand at a dog walker she knew at the park, and continued. Well, as I was saying, Hugh is passionate about taking long hikes in the countryside. But his wife Pearl prefers to go off to the town of Banff to do a little shopping or exploring there. Then she comes back to the cabin and reads a book all day long. Much like me, Pearl is absolutely passionate about reading. The couple have very different ideas of relaxation, which is why when they first got married, me being the perennial cynic that I am, I never believed the couple would work out, because they were so different. But maybe that's their secret, because it turns out they're extremely good for each other. Pearl is very studious, whereas Hugh is an outdoorsy type. He's a botanist, you know. Anyway, one day while Pearl was watching over the children, who were industriously playing with Lego blocks in the front room of the cabin, building a castle of blocks, which was balancing so precariously, I believe Pearl was convinced that in any second the whole thing would come toppling over, and she was privately wondering if she should rescue it or not. Hugh had gone off as usual on one of his long hiking adventures, saying he'd be back later that evening. Pearl was sitting down on a chair, getting stuck into one of her books. If I know her, it was a thriller. She likes books with gripping twists, much like I do. Anyway, she looked up from her book for a moment, only to see her granddaughter Verity had stepped away from the Lego blocks and was waving at something at the window and talking at it, as if she thought somebody was there. Pearl was privately amused by this idiosyncratic, rather unorthodox behaviour coming from her granddaughter, and simply assumed that her grandchild was enjoying the company of an invisible friend. She said to Verity very nonchalantly, "Who are you talking to?" And Verity said to her, "The hairy lady that was at the window. She's so nice, Granny, but she's gone now 'cause she's ever so shy. I don't think she wanted you to see her." "That's a bit freaky," I admitted. "Do you think Verity actually saw someone there at the window? Or do you think it was her imagination, perhaps? I know as a child I used to have a make-believe friend myself. It used to drive my mother absolutely potty. She'd tell me I was making it all up in my head, and it wasn't good to make stuff up." "That was extremely unreasonable of your mother," said Cordelia disapprovingly. "I always believe we should encourage creativity in our children. I mean, look at your husband Titan, for example. Look at his success with writing. I can guarantee his parents encouraged his creativity when he was a boy. And look where he is now." "It's funny you should say that, Cordelia, but it's true. When Titan was growing up, he was always making up stories to himself and play-acting that he was an Indian warrior or something like that. His parents encouraged him to get all creative and supported him in his childlike indulgences. They'd buy him fancy dress outfits in order to play the characters he imagined himself to be. Whereas if I'd behaved like that, my mother would have believed it was unhealthy for a kid to pretend to be something they were not. She hated my so-called invisible friend, and even took me to see a psychologist, who told her that my behaviour was extremely normal for a little girl, and that our imagination should be nurtured rather than discouraged, but my mother thought it was all baloney. Well, I hope the psychologist spoke some sense to your mother, and made her realise that all art forms in our children should be actively encouraged, especially today, when creativity is successfully losing its grip on our children. And that's tragic as far as I am concerned. So many children get caught up in social media these days and the internet, and sometimes they lose the ability to think or express themselves, which is a dreadful shame as far as I'm concerned. I cannot help but wonder if this latest generation of ours is going to be able to write at all. Everything is going to be left to AI, and the thought of that is too dreadful to even contemplate." "I hope not," I said, shaking my head furiously. "That would be a pitiful waste of creative talent if everything was left to AI. And I'm sorry, but I don't believe AI could ever be as creative as human beings are. Sorry, I'm dragging you away from your story. You were saying Verity claimed she was talking to a hairy lady standing at the window, who was waving at her and she was waving back, and that your sister-in-law thought she was talking to an invisible friend. Is that right?" "Well, she thought Verity was caught up in the world of make-believe, as Verity is by nature an extremely imaginative child. I, for one, would love to see her use her creativity in a productive way. She's an excellent artist, you know. Some of her drawings are marvellous for a girl so young. Anyway, to get along with things, my sister-in-law, Pearl, half-heartedly said, 'Tell me about the hairy man you saw at the window, Verity.' Of course, she didn't expect the little girl to say very much, because Verity is by nature a rather subdued, quiet child. But on this particular occasion, she became objectionably indignant. And let's just say Pearl never saw that coming for a second. Verity looked up at her, stamped her foot indignantly, and said, 'It's not a hairy man, Granny. It's a hairy lady. A lady in hair. A lady who's got lots and lots of hair, and it's rude to call a lady a man. You should know that. She's gone now, because she doesn't want to see you.' So what is her name, then, this hairy lady you saw at the window?" Pearl asked Verity, with an amused note in her voice. "Her name is Mooka," said Verity. "She lives in the woods. She says she has a little girl just like me, and that we should play together." "Wow," I said. "How did your sister-in-law react to that?" "Well, she laughed, didn't she? Brushed it off as child's play. But when she glanced up at the window, she noticed that there was a big smudge that seemed like a nose had been pressed against the pane of the window. It had definitely not been there moments before. The cabin's windows are always sparkling. As the chalet maids, the cleaning company I was telling you about, I recruit them weekly, and they make sure that everything is absolutely spick and span. The window was 8 feet off the ground, so it didn't seem remotely possible that someone's nose could have been pressed against the window at that height. It didn't make any sense at all. But that means somebody must have been standing outside the window, probably looking in at Verity. It makes sense that the child must have seen something. Possibly. But anyway, Pearl's curiosity was obviously aroused. So she went out of the cabin to investigate, didn't she? And there in the soil was a huge footprint. But it wasn't a regular footprint like you might expect. The size of this thing was ginormous. It freaked her out, let me tell you, because she knew no normal person has a foot that large. You mean she saw a footprint like a big footprint? Is that what you're saying? It certainly fits the profile of the hairy lady that Verity was describing to you. Well, at that time, I very much doubted that my sister-in-law was entertaining ideas of Bigfoot, but she was very impressed with the size of that print nevertheless, and the toes that were visibly splayed at an odd angle. She wondered if Verity's imagination had not been so spurious after all, and whether someone could have genuinely been staring in at them through the window. And whoever they were, they must have had massive feet and were exceedingly tall. She was extremely alarmed to think about the possibility of a stranger being on the premises, as she was alone in the cabin with the 2 children. Hugh was out hiking, wasn't he? I guess discovering the footprint in the ground like that exposed her vulnerability, because that cabin is quite literally in the middle of nowhere. Damn right she felt vulnerable, I said. Certainly if I saw a footprint outside the window like that, I'd also freak out. It's scary being in a remote, sequestered location, thinking someone might be clandestinely watching you. I've always been a city girl and found safety in crowds of people. But being alone like that in the middle of nowhere, with just a couple of kids for company, it's like being caught up in a horror movie, don't you think, Cordelia? I don't think Pearl viewed it quite like that, Shelley, said Cordelia reflectively. Don't forget, my sister-in-law has been to the cabin on numerous occasions, and nothing untoward has ever happened to her there. I know she thoroughly enjoys the escapism of being in the beautiful countryside, but there was no doubt, seeing that large footprint outside the cabin window and the smudge on the glass pane was exceedingly unnerving for her, as it would likely be for anyone in her situation, I imagine. What did Hugh think about the matter? I asked. Well, that's a very good question you ask, Shelley, said Cordelia. Let's just say after he returned from his little adventure, or enjoyable hike, if you'd like, well, Pearl took him to inspect the outside window with her. She wanted to point out the smudge on the glass pane, along with a huge footprint she had found embedded in the soil beneath the window, explaining to him that maybe there had been an unwanted intruder on the property. But when she pointed to the ground where the footprint had been, only a while before, it had mysteriously disappeared, almost as if someone had purposely wiped it away to cover their tracks, which was extraordinary to say the very least. So it was gone? I asked. Well, it was gone, said Cordelia, nodding her head. Yes, indeed. The footprint had all but vanished. But you need to believe me, Hugh. There was a footprint there under the window, Pearl told her husband, looking at him earnestly with wide eyes. I'm telling you, Hugh, it was there. There was a large footprint under the window. It was absolutely huge. You can't believe the size of this thing. Look, love, I don't mean to be mean, Hugh told his wife, but the grandchildren can be exhausting and distracting. And you've also been caught up, I may remind you, in reading a very exciting thriller. Maybe reality and fiction got their wires crossed for a moment, and you're just a wee bit confused. I don't mean to be rude, but maybe you imagined all this. As you can imagine, Pearl was livid, furious with her husband for dismissing what she was saying. Did you not hear a word I said? She snapped. Quit patronising me, will you? I know what I saw. I thought that Verity was making it up. The face at the window, I mean. She's 6 years old, and kids that age are notorious for having invisible friends. But when I saw the footprint there myself, I became unduly alarmed, Hugh. I promise you, it was there. I'm not making any of this up. You've got to believe me. Well, it's not there now, is it? My brother said rather scathingly. You know kids. They have fertile imaginations. It was probably nothing. Pearl said she did begin to feel rather foolish, and wondered if after all she had imagined the footprint outside the window, although deep down she knew very differently. But I think sometimes it's easier for people to put a band-aid over their concerns, to pretend they don't actually exist. It's easier that way, and that's what Pearl did. She persuaded herself that no reasonable-sized man could be over 8 foot tall, so the smudge at the window must have come from an insect or something that had banged itself against the glass pane and left a mark there. But she did ponder over what she thought she'd seen, especially the big footprint that she'd seen in the ground. But she was unable to make any sense of any of it, and privately did wonder to herself if perhaps her thriller novel had been leading her imagination astray. Anyway, the next day Maximilian and Verity asked Pearl if they could play hide-and-go-seek in the woods, and Pearl, wanting to be a good grandmother, wholeheartedly agreed to that idea. All the while, as she was playing this game with her grandchildren, she had an overwhelming sense that she was being clandestinely watched by someone. But when she looked around and about herself, nothing was there. The game innocently continued, and at one point in time Verity went missing in the middle of the game. It was like she just vanished into thin air and was nowhere to be found. She and her grandson, Maximilian, could not find Verity anywhere, and so, as you can imagine, Pearl began to panic. "Verity!" she kept crying out. "Come out of your hiding place! The game's over!" But there was no answer, and she said the woodgrove became ominously still, and she didn't feel good about any of this. She had horrifying, rather traumatic visions of having to explain to her son that Verity had disappeared, never to be seen again. She didn't know what she should do. She frantically began to earnestly search the entire woodgrove, but there was no sign of Verity anywhere. She was about to go back to the cabin to call the sheriff's office. Then Verity appeared from nowhere, her face, dress, and hands covered in sticky crimson stains. Pearl was furious with her grandchild, asking her where on earth she'd been, and why she'd got herself so dirty, because it looked like she'd been eating hundreds of berries, and wandered off on her own, obviously losing complete interest in the game of hide-and-seek that they'd been playing together. "I was eating berries with Mooka and Barley," Verity told her so nonchalantly. "Mooka wanted me to meet Barley, her little girl. She's very nice. We played a game together. We ate berries. But Mooka said I had to get back to you 'cause you might start worrying about me. But I wish I could go back and play with Mooka and Barley. I like to play with them. It's better than playing hide-and-go-seek with you. It's much more fun." Pearl grabbed Verity by the hand and scolded her very firmly, saying, "You can't play with Mooka again. Do you understand?" she scolded her granddaughter. "You scared me half to death. Don't you dare go wandering off like that again. You promise me you won't wander off?" "Good Lord," I said. "Verity vanishes in a game of hide-and-go-seek and claims that she spent time with a hairy lady called Mooka and a little girl called Barley. It doesn't sound to me as if she was making any of this up." Well, that's exactly what Pearl thought at the time. Of course, she told Hugh about the unorthodox event in the woods where they were playing hide-and-go-seek together. But Hugh didn't take anything she said seriously. He merely shrugged his shoulders very nonchalantly and claimed that Verity always had a sweet tooth and loved berries, and obviously got distracted during a game of hide-and-seek and decided to dine out on a bush of berries, choosing to make up the story of Mooka, who, of course, my brother was convinced was just an invisible friend. By now, Pearl was beginning to nurse a plethora of doubts all of her own. She believed something very strange was going on with her grandchild Verity, who continuously rambled on and on and on about Mooka this and Mooka that and Barley this and Barley that all the time, as if Mooka and Barley were her new very best friends. Her brother Maximilian was getting irritated by all this, becoming extremely annoyed, and calling his sister stupid for making up these crazy stories.
"Why do you make up all these lies? You didn't want to play hide-and-go-seek with us, did you? You just ate all those berries, and that you pretend that you have a friend called Mooka. I haven't seen your friend. You're lying. That's what you're doing. You're lying. You're telling porkies."
"No, I'm not." A couple of days later, as Pearl was sitting in the living room doing some reading while the children were once again playing a game together, she suddenly observed Verity waving madly at the window again, like she'd done that first time. But this time she cried out excitedly, with a rather unbridled childlike enthusiasm, "Mooka! Mooka!" Pearl was so taken aback by this she rushed over to the window. She saw something tearing away at a lightning speed. She observed a flash of a dark, shadowy humanoid figure, but it was so ambiguously vague, so incredibly obscure, she didn't know what she was seeing. But she did know she had seen something. She dashed outside the cabin as quickly as she could to see if she could get a better view of this thing that she thought she'd seen. But it had hurriedly dashed into the trees and was gone from her sight in what seemed like mere seconds. She'd never seen anything move with that speed before. She went to look outside the cabin window again, to see if she could see any imprints in the soil, but it was all very dry. But when she went back into the cabin, this time her grandson Maximilian said, "Did you see Mooka, Granny? She was waving at us. Mooka is real. I thought that, Verity was making it up. But she wasn't. Mooka is real." Well, Pearl couldn't believe that her 8-year-old grandson was now talking about Mooka, and it seemed very unlikely that both children would claim to have the same invisible friend. Pearl began to reflect over these things, and she began to be certain that Mooka was real, and wonder if her grandchildren had actually seen a female Bigfoot. She mentioned the idea to Hugh, whom I'm afraid to say was not very diplomatic or sensitive in regards to the matter, or in regards to his wife's fragile feelings. He laughed at her, and thought she was being utterly ridiculous. "Have you forgotten what it's like to be a child?" he teased. "They make up all kinds of preposterous nonsense, do they not? The kids are sharing the same invisible friend. It's not as far-fetched as you may believe it is." The very next morning, my brother decided to go for an early morning hike to the creek in the woods. He said he'd be back by lunch, but he did not return for quite a long time, and when he did, he was very, very confused. He claimed he'd been sitting by the creek, and then had drifted off to sleep, and hours had gone by. He woke up to discover himself, fast asleep by the creek, and he checked the time on his watch, and he couldn't believe it. He said he could hear someone laughing, and it felt personal, as if they were laughing at him. The strange laughter spooked him, as my brother has not fallen asleep before on a hike in the woods ever. The laughing continued, of course, and then he heard a very strange snoring sound. He said it was as if someone was making the same noise as he probably made when he fell asleep, because my brother is a big snorer. And he felt as if they were almost ridiculing him, making fun of him, whoever this person was. There was nothing in the grove. He looked everywhere to find this person that had been mimicking his snoring, so to speak. But they were nowhere to be found. So he returned back to the cabin extremely bemused. He said there was no way he should have fallen asleep like that for several hours. When he woke up, he'd been so disorientated, so very confused. So he told Pearl that he thought someone had been there at the creek watching him all this time while he'd fallen asleep. They both concluded that maybe there was indeed a female Bigfoot on the property, playing games with them. My brother spoke to me about it last night, after he returned from the trip to the cabin, of course, and asked me what I thought about the matter. And what do you think? I asked, looking at Cordelia curiously. I tell you what I think, said Cordelia. I believe most children have wild imaginations. That's a well-established fact. And I know that Verity is an impressionable young child and very imaginative. But there is no doubt in my mind that the unorthodox events that occurred at the cabin have almost certainly given me pause for thought. And that has made me reevaluate everything that I think I do believe. I didn't know what to make of Cordelia's extraordinary story, which was not discussed much after that, and was soon forgotten about. But after 5 years went by, my husband suddenly announced he was suffering from writer's block. I didn't know what he was talking about, as the terminology was not something I was well acquainted with. What's that supposed to mean? I asked him. You've never heard of writer's block before? You do surprise me, said Titan, looking somewhat confounded. What it means is my mind is a blank at the moment. I've been paid to write this thriller with a sizable advance. I even sent my synopsis to the publisher and it's been approved. But I can't get anything down on paper. My publisher, Nikki, just called me to ask how things are going. And I'll be damned if I tell her the truth. So I told her things were going great, because what else could I say? That the ideas were flowing onto my computer screen with effortless ease? Which is a lie, of course. I just keep staring blindly at the computer, and nothing inspires me at all. I'm becoming like a blank canvas, no colour on it at all. It's as if I've got a paintbrush in my hand, and I have no clue what to paint. It's been like that for a while. I don't know what on earth to do about it. I was shocked by Titan's rather startling revelations, and told him I was certain something would come. But I could see the doubt in his eyes, and it certainly didn't help that he looked as if he was beginning to panic. I mentioned to Cordelia on our trip to the park about my husband's confession. Good Lord! I'm surprised he hasn't suffered from the condition sooner. Don't get me wrong. Our lovely apartments here in Tribeca are great. Of course they are. But in my personal experience, writers sometimes need a change of environment, a change of scene, to inspire their creativity. I'm not talking about the regular holidays that families tend to take. This is something altogether different. The pair of you need to get away to somewhere incredibly peaceful, spectacularly beautiful, somewhere quiet, so that your husband can focus on writing. My bet is the moment you're in a different location that meets those criteria, his novel will begin to write itself. And I'm not joking about that either. You really think it would help getting away somewhere quiet? I asked doubtfully. But of course it will. It'll make the world of difference to your husband, let me tell you. There is nothing like a change of scene to get the creative juices flowing. It's an established fact that artists, painters, poets alike will often go to spectacular locations around the globe, usually parts of the world that are scenically magnificent, where they can enjoy some peace, quiet, and idyllic tranquility. And that is where the magic will happen. Some of the greatest masterpieces, Shelley dear, were written in the most glorious of locations. I don't believe for a second that Titan's writer's block will disappear until you do get away. Sometimes the mind knows that it needs to be refueled, re-energized, and inspired all over again. Writer's block is something that happens to most writers, although some writers from the past, like that children's author Enid Blyton, well, she could write anywhere, any time, and at any moment. My mother used to say that Enid Blyton was one of those enigmatic, extraordinary children's authors that had an imagination on her that could stir up a tsunami. The words just flowed onto the paper like manna from heaven. But not all writers are that lucky, I'm afraid. As far as I'm concerned, your husband Titan needs a dramatic change of scene. You need to get away to a quiet, restful retreat, far away from the distractions of a busy city. I'm sorry, but New York is hardly what I would describe as a writer's paradise. There are so many distractions around here, especially in this apartment block of ours. It doesn't help that there has been some repair work going on at the brownstone apartment down the road, with all that scaffolding outside it, and those dreadful builders making one hell of a noise. I actually complained about it the other day, you know, but fat lot of good it did for me. The builders told me they were restoring the place, and the noise just could not be helped. One of them was smirking at me. He looked rather delighted that he was causing so much inconvenience. Then let's not forget about the postal worker that's recently been recruited. Well, he makes a right old noise, doesn't he, when he delivers the post? Never heard anything like it before. It was Mr. Rice who delivered our post before him, but he's retired now. He was a quiet, very pleasant man, and when he came to your door he was very discreet. You barely heard from him. But this new postman bangs the letterboxes so loudly, thumps up the staircase in those heavy, ungainly boots of his, which would probably wake the living dead if given half a chance. And if that's not bad enough, the new lady that has moved on the other side of me to you, her name's Valerie Cox. Well, she's been having parties about 3 times a week, next door to me. She makes one hell of a noise, which I'm sure you must get to hear. And she laughs like a hyena. It goes right through me, and my walls begin to vibrate and shake. I truly think I'd prefer a gun going off near my ears than to hear that dreadful laugh of hers. Is it any wonder that your poor husband Titan is not able to concentrate? Frankly, I don't know how he does it living here. I would advise you to get away for a couple of weeks. Go away somewhere very quiet, peaceful, and magnificent to behold. You're right. The noises have been dreadful of late. Titan hasn't mentioned them, of course, but they're bound to be a major distraction for him. Well, I guess we're going to have to do what you say, because Titan's publishers are already on his back. Well, Nikki is. That's his publisher's name. And she's asking him how the thriller is getting along. And for the last week or so, Titan has been lying to her. But he's telling me that he's just staring at a blank screen on his computer and can't think of anything to write. And I've seen the panic in his eyes. I think he's clandestinely rather worried he'll never be able to write again. Cordelia chuckled. I don't think Titan need worry himself about that. Once a writer, always a writer. The ideas will come. But he's stuck at the moment between a rock and a hard place, I'm most sure. But going away is the solution to this problem. It'll be inspirational for Titan. I know it will. But where will we go, Cordelia? You say it must be somewhere quiet and peaceful. Where would you recommend? Have you got any ideas, perhaps? A light suddenly went on in Cordelia's eyes. Oh, my word! Why didn't I think of it before? It's staring me in the face. I've got the perfect solution for your problem. Why don't you go and stay in my late husband's cabin near Banff? You'll absolutely love it there. It's in the middle of nowhere, of course, but it's got spectacular views. Mountains, lakes, you name it. It's got everything. If there is any place in the world that will make your husband's mind hemorrhage words as if he's punctured his carotid artery, well, it's got to be my late husband's cabin, of course. If Titan doesn't write a bestseller there, then I think there is no hope for the man. No hope at all. You're talking about the cabin where your brother's granddaughter, Verity, seemed to have befriended a female Bigfoot, although you aren't sure whether that's true or not. I'm talking about the very same cabin. We don't know what happened there. Those unorthodox events are still very perplexing, let's just say. But my brother and his wife are certain that there is a Bigfoot on their property. Maybe if the Bigfoot is real, you'll see her, Cordelia teased. Then you'll be able to affirm to my brother, and of course his wife, that they haven't been losing their minds after all. I very much doubt I'll see a female Bigfoot, I said scathingly, although I will admit, when I heard Hugh's story for myself, it had a major impact on my life. It made me view the world through a different lens, so I guess I'm a lot more open-minded these days about stuff. I'm just worried, Cordelia, that being the city girl that I so obviously am, that I'll get awfully lonely while my husband is writing his novel, and I'm left to my own devices in the middle of nowhere, twiddling my thumbs. I might want to tear my hair out by the time I go back home. I could be bored out of my skull. I've never actually been that good in my own company, you know.
Well, it might be good for you to get away to somewhere remote, said Cordelia. Every holiday you and your husband have been on has always been around a bustling city where you busy yourself all the times. You never know, going somewhere out in nature could be exactly what the doctor ordered. I mean, think about it. You've battled to get pregnant over the last 5 years or so. Your IVF treatments have failed abysmally, and your doctor told you that you're unduly stressed, which is why he believed the treatments never took. I think when you live in a big city like this, many people are living with undue stress without even realizing it. You've said that your mother has been relentlessly on your back, complaining to you that your sister has 2 children already and asking you what on earth is wrong with you. She thinks you're pretending that you want a baby when you don't really, when in truth she hasn't got a clue how hard you've been trying to get pregnant.
What are you saying, Cordelia? I asked rather bluntly.
What I'm saying is that you might as well kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Perhaps if you're in a more relaxed state of mind, you'll more easily fall pregnant. And your husband Titan will get some great ideas for his book and begin to write again. Please say that you'll go to my late husband's cabin, Shelley. I don't believe you will regret it for a moment. It's magnificently beautiful there. And you've never been to Canada before. You won't be disappointed, I can promise you that.
So there we are. That is the end of part 3 of our story. Part 4 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me there. Until next time, goodbye and good night.